Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Tuesday night's episode of Getting Defensive, brought to you by GridironRatings.com. I'm your host, Craig Reith, and with me, as always, is the man himself, Gary, the IDP tipster. Sorry we run a little bit late, fine-tuning some stuff tonight, but Gary, how are you this Tuesday night?
I am doing great. And hello, fantasy football fans.
Yep, we are good to go to give you some stuff a little bit off the beaten path, a little bit different than we've had on here lately. There's been a lot of rookie talk, a lot of ranking talk, and some mock drafts. But tonight we're going to talk sort of some basics, if you will, about IDP leagues. We're going to get into scoring, settings, sort of league setup type stuff to give people sort of a broad view. We're not going to get too much into the little details, but a broad view of the stuff, and then how you can dig a little bit deeper if you want to for your leagues. Of course, before we do that, we got news to get into. The big news of the week, of course, the man himself in terms of defensive linemen in the IDP world has decided to come back. Aaron Donald re-signed. He got what was an extension. I think I saw so like 2 years, 40 million, 2 years, 30 million, something like that. I don't remember the exact amount, but hopefully
Crazy.
well, he's earned it. I mean, the man really didn't have anything else left to prove.
Right.
But
Right.
Gary, if you have him in leagues, or if people watching have him in leagues, is this enough to keep you up from trading him, or are you still looking to cash out, knowing the end is probably coming up here soon? If you're not contending, clearly a contender, you're keeping him.
Right. If you're a contender, you got to go for it. Or if you think you are intending on being a contender, then you should really hold on to them. I mean, just ride the train. Ride it out into the sunset. This is the guy's not showed any sign of losing a step. I mean, even in dynasty leagues. I mean, even if he only played this year and say quit, I can't see how it's not a bonus. Now, if you're not contending, or if you're not going to be, try to cash in, but don't undersell. I mean, I do my best not to undersell that. Somebody in a league is contending. They should want to pay for that.
Oh yeah, and he's a guy that's valuable in just straight old defensive line leagues. No matter your defensive line setup, whether it's D tackles, interior linemen, straight D line, he's valuable across the board.
And we
So
don't know. So, look at Hayward. What is he? Hayward, Cameron Hayward with Pittsburgh's, 36 years old right now, and he's
sounds right,
coming
yeah.
back, and he hasn't lost a step. Now, I'm not saying that Donald is him, but sure, Donald sure can be him in longevity too if he stays healthy enough. He might decide, hey, I might play till I'm 38. If he's capable, and they keep throwing that money at him. Never know.
Yep, you never know. Or he could just, I suppose, decide that he wants to be done anyway. But it
Right.
certainly seems like if you're signing that deal, you're going to stick around to get that money, because that is a
Mhm.
load of money for a guy who's, I mean, Donald's only been in the league for like 8 years.
Mhm.
Um, he plays a tough position, but he's still got a number of years on him if he wants. So good to see him back for all you IDP lovers.
Yep, he is a bad man.
Next two are not nearly as sexy for IDP leagues, but sort of worth mentioning for a couple reasons. We have OTAs sort of going on here now, and you're going to have news sprinkled in and out of there. One of them speaks to Julian Aquara, who was an edge player last year, and he has been for the Lions. He's getting some work as an off-ball linebacker in addition to edge rusher. Of course, they drafted, Aiden Hutchinson as an edge guy. They drafted Josh Pascal, again, another edge guy. So they've loaded up on that. They also loaded up on linebackers as they're trying to figure that out. But Gary, when you see this sort of headline and news about a player like Julian, how do you interpret that and take that as a fantasy player?
Well, in this particular situation, you see these flashes of this kind of news on some of these networks, and it's all great, but make sure that you're doing your homework, because I think that at this point, he's definitely a depth player that's probably learning both positions to keep a job on this roster. If you're capable and you're any good at doing this, then it's going to increase his value. He hasn't been anything special in the past. It's his brother that got the big contract, which was hurt last year, giving the opportunity for, his brother, the one we're talking about, Julian, I believe the other guy's name's Romeo, or his
Yep.
brother's name's Romeo. Right. To give Julian a chance to earn a spot, because, like you just mentioned, they've drafted two high profile rookies. Actually, one of the top high profile probably, and then another good profile guy, and then you still got Harris, that has revived his whole career, and Romeo is supposed to be, I think, back. They're anticipating him back. So he's the highest paid linebacker or edge rusher on their squad. I think he's a top 3 or 4 pay in the might be on the whole team right now.
Yeah,
So
they give
they're
him a lot of money.
right. They might not rush him back. That's a possibility. He's still a young dude too, but I don't know. It sounds like this guy's just trying to make sure that he's upping his value to the team. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean the OTAs. There's no harm. I mean they kind of know what they have with him, and it's a pass rusher. It feels like I don't know that they would have gone
Right.
out and spent those two. I think it was a first and a second round pick on edge rushers if they were completely
Mhm.
happy with what they had. Clearly, they aren't completely happy with their off ball linebackers, given the state of that. So why not? Why not give it a shot? See if a guy that you already have can do it.
Mhm.
And if it
Might
works out,
excel.
great.
You never know. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Might excel at it.
Something similar. And if you follow Gary on Twitter, of course, you can find him at the IDP Tipster. He had a tweet about this back on May 24th, so not too long ago, but we're going to go to the Eagles linebackers quick. News coming out about Nakobe Dean is that the Philadelphia defensive coaching staff has just been dazzled, was the word, by his intelligence since the pre-draft process. One of the sports writers for the Eagles, which of course, okay, first of all, it's a sports writer. It's not directly from the team. And then it's in OTAs again. So another grain of salt. Thought that he may be able to earn the green dot as soon as this year. And he may play most of the defensive snaps as he's learning both the Mike and Will positions, which I think they would be hoping for a guy like him where they drafted him, considering the lack of draft capital that they spend on linebackers in general. But Gary, you had a poll up sort of asking about this. He had 3
Mhm.
options who are the 2 sort of inside linebackers that'll be starting week 1, which of course is just Twitter's opinion. But he had TJ Edwards and Nakobe Dean, 16%. Nakobe Dean and Kaiser White at 38.9%. And then Kaiser White and TJ Edwards won the poll at 45%. So does this news come to you with any sort of a different view than the view that sort of we got with Julian Aquara, where he's a known commodity to the Lions, where it feels like they're trying something new, where Nakobe Dean's one of the shiny new toys for the Philadelphia Eagles, and there's a lot of good news. Do you view that differently?
Yeah, I mean, definitely from the news we just talked about. I mean, it's another one of those things. You got to look at the profiled players involved, and in this one, it's probably where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, the reason I did the poll, I really wanted to know what was on people's mind, and I believe, sorry for the moment, you did say that White and Dean won,
White and
or
Edwards at 45%.
White and Edwards won, right? Which I can see, but I think a lot of that has to do with the people wondering why he slid, the rookie slid, right?
Yep.
So yeah. I mean, I think I think where this smoke in this situation, I think there's fire. I like Edwards. I think he's earned his job the hard way, and he's put in the time to deserve it. But I don't think that he's an elite enough guy that if Dean is ready to roll, that they're going to keep him off. And when I look at it the other way around for White, I don't see Edwards beating White in coverage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's going to boil down to, Edwards is probably just going to be that third guy. It just, how quick it happens. I don't know. If he's learning the job and he's healthy, what they got to lose. I mean, you got to put your best players on the field if at all possible.
I think it'll be interesting to see what the Eagles actually do. So, if Dean comes in and he's that amazing, maybe they don't give it to him right away. Maybe it's a couple weeks in. But
Right.
if that does happen, are they going to stick with him? Because we've seen just this Eagles coaching staff play linebacker roulette, whether it's
Yep.
in the game or bye week, and it's just a mess for any IDP fantasy owner. It's sort of been a stay away.
They
You'll
found
get
a
a guy like
starter in
Singleton.
Canada, right? They found a starter in Canada I mean, it doesn't happen too often. Wasn't Singleton from Canada
I,
League?
I don't actually know. I can look that up
I
quick.
do
But
think that Alex Singleton came from the Canada Football League, Canadian Football League. Excuse me.
well, let's see here. So he was undrafted. He made some practice squads for 2015 with a number of different teams, and then yes, he played 3 years with the Calgary Stampeders, 2016 to 2018.
What do
He
you
was a
know?
first round pick by by them in 2016. That tells you the state of affairs a little bit in the CFL. But in 2019, he moved to the Eagles and was there for 3 years. Yep.
Yeah. We had a 50-50 shot. I had a progressive moment, so I knew it was, but I was pretty sure it was.
So yeah, I mean, clearly the Eagles the past few years lately, it's been a while
Mhm.
since they've
Yep.
invested in that linebacker position, and using a third round pick on a guy that a lot of people thought might be a first round pick.
Yeah.
Clearly, they saw something in him and they're willing to roll the dice. So
And I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced if Dean hadn't slid that they probably wouldn't have addressed the inside linebacker position again this year. They would have just done what they've been doing and throw putty at the wall and see what sticks.
it'll be a place to watch though, because whoever does end up starting there, you're going to have some level of production, assuming there isn't a crazy timeshare. It's just a starter and name where everyone's playing 60 to 30% themselves. But someone's going to get us points there, and that's what we're going to be looking for.
Yep, sure is.
All right. So before we go ahead and get into the meat of the show, I want to thank everyone once again, as always, for whoever's watching here over on gridironratings.com YouTube channel. You can find us there. I think 308 subscribers. We're moving up. So thank you everyone who's been subscribing, hitting the like button, notifications, tuning into all the great shows that we have here. We got the Fantasy Chop Shop, we have Rider Dynasty, and of course the two gritting defensive shows on Tuesdays and Thursdays. There's a whole bunch of great content coming, not just on the defensive side. Those offensive guys know what they're talking about too. So thank you everyone. Make sure you do subscribe if you're watching and you haven't yet. Make sure you head on over to gridironratings.com where you can see all of the other info as far as articles. You got Brandon Jackson's been dropping a lot of articles. Gary's been dropping articles on the defensive side there, but don't ignore that offensive side. There is another side of the ball that we do play with too, but we just don't talk about them on this show.
And you make sure you're following Kraig too, folks. He's being modest. He's got some great stuff going on over at Roto Heat, and at the same time, he's got a new podcast you guys got to check out. Got a little boo behind it.
Yeah, if you like the paranormal and like fantasy football, it'd probably be right up your alley. So you can go ahead and check those out and tell me what you think about stories people share about ghosts or Sasquatch, things like that. And who knows, maybe Gary will show up on one of these episodes coming up there, so you get to see him there too.
Yep, I hope so. Be kind of
but
cool.
The meat of the show tonight, again, we're going to sort of be getting into, and I'm going to be bringing up a number of scoring systems that are just examples. These are not necessarily things that were pulled. A lot of the stuff was made out of whole cloth just so we can show you the differences in scoring once we get that far. But Gary, before we get to that, I want to sort of talk on a broader level. We're going to start off with sort of these people that are getting into IDP. So you have a group of friends that say are either adding IDP through like a supplemental draft or starting the league with IDP, that most of them haven't done it before or anything. What do you feel roster position wise is a good way to start out, assuming people don't want to jump in with both feet? We know a lot of times the degenerates that can convince their friends to do that or that. But for sort of beginners, what do you feel is comfortable for beginners?
Right. And this is going to be at a level I think that you get a good bite of IDP is something. What you don't want to do, okay, is you don't want to go too shallow on how many and what positions and all that off the top, because the next thing you know, it's kind of like that feeling everybody's got a kicker or defense or something. It just doesn't have the effect. You do need to split them up a little bit to try to get that full effect. You're talking standard size leagues or something like that with 12. I would really suggest no less than 6 with the basic general, designated positions being used. Of course, we're getting ready to talk a little bit more about some other things like that. So, but 6. I think 6 is a good one. It makes you pay attention if you do look around, even at the higher level tier. People have to realize that there is an upper tier that if you don't play this upper tier, or if you don't play beyond this upper tier, then everybody's just got a kicker, a bunch of kickers. It's just a matter of who happens to score that week and who else. There's no strategic thing to it. So you do got to push it a little bit just to get that full effect, or you're not going to learn.
I think for a lot of people, to your point, they say, oh, well, why don't we just start off with one at each position, which you could do. But I agree with you, Gary. When you're doing that, it's basically everyone's pulling someone off the top 10 list for linebackers, defensive backs, and defensive linemen. And at that point, you can drop an Aaron Donald, who we talked about earlier, and pick someone up, because of a bye. And you're probably not going to have an enormous drop off in production most years, which takes out the strategy and sort of the fun of being able to find guys on the waiver wire that, a lot of people do. Most leagues still have waivers out there, whether it's, round robin based on where your current standings are or blind bids. There's still strategy involved at that point, where if you're just picking up a stud and dropping the stud because you feel like it isn't as fun, and it takes away the value of learning the IDP position. So I agree with you there.
And I've had other IDP guys, and I just want to clarify that I'm not against this, that said, hey man, I don't care if it's 1, 2, 3, get them at least to get their feet wet. Hey, I if that's it too, there it is. I'm just asking you before, if you didn't enjoy that format because you kind of had that feeling like everybody, you just got to push it just another step forward and just make it a little bit more interesting.
Or have a plan in place to, year 1, you start off that way. Maybe year 2, you expand it a little bit more, but make sure you have that figured out ahead of time for your league, because adjusting stuff on the fly usually doesn't go well for offense, defense, or whatever side of the ball you're looking at here.
Right.
Are there big differences in how you would set up a league in terms of, bench spots usually, but beyond that, you redraft to dynasty, any other real differences that you see between those if you're setting up a dynasty an IDP league?
In general, no. I'm not one to go putting a bunch of bench spots on there to begin with on either one of those formats. I like a shallower bench. I like keeping everybody busy. Make the waiver wire active. Especially in taking a risk in those leagues that you don't have a bunch of guys that trade, so that just sits dormant. That dynasty sits dormant for weeks and weeks at a time. And I like having those shallow benches myself. I just thought I might throw that in there about that. I think that's different from a lot of formats out there now. Depending on, but I guess if you're worried about DV or Superflex or something like that, maybe that's enough to keep your guys active. I'm not really sure. Did I just have a progressive moment?
No, I think that makes sense.
All right.
What I am loading up here, though, is we are going to jump into scoring here. That way you guys can all sort of see what we are talking about. So as soon as this loads up for me, you will see some examples that we have here in terms of these different sort of scorings. Now I have them just plainly labeled because, again, these are fresh things that we have made up here. We have a couple different examples of what tackle heavy would be, sort of a balanced, and then, big play, and then sack heavy. So sort of by name, you can get a feel for what the point of these is. One of the nice things about IDP is that if you're getting into it, you can create whole cloth, even whatever you want with your friends. When I started my first IDP league, that's exactly what we did. Me and another guy I was the commissioner, but he was helping me with a lot of it. We sort of sat down, sort of went off of what made sense to us, and we really haven't altered it over the years. It's worked for our league, and it's sort of more of a balanced. It isn't on here, but it's something similar to that, where we wanted to have not just the big play guys matter, but we also didn't want the guys that are just tackle heavy. We wanted to reward those big plays, but not have it be the be-all, end-all for a league. And so, to create some differences here, you can tell some of these leagues have certain things counted, like a safety, a TD or a blocked kick. Others don't have them. But Gary, we'll start off with just the categories here. Are these sort of the categories that you use in the leagues that you're in, or the things that you generally add or kick out?
Well, I mean, I prefer the balanced format, not only between IDP plays, from a cornerback or defensive back to a defensive lineman. I try to balance that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I also mainly want to have it balanced with my offense. If I can't have my IDP guys at least at the same projected value as your main linebackers, or depending on your scoring format or who you're kind of highlighting, and I'll explain that in a second. The who they should be up there just with the running back ones, the wide receiver ones. Get them up there in that range, where they're projected or landing at the end of the season. Make it balanced across the whole format. I prefer the balanced, but what I've found messing with balanced formats over and over, you're still going to likely have to really pick which group is going to come out just a little bit ahead. I mean, it's hard to tweak one in a standard league, standard type of scoring. It's kind of hard to tweak to where you can get every one of them within the same, say, 25 to 50 range. You're still going to have an outlier to position. It just it depends. So I favor one myself that favors the edge rushers, the interior defensive linemen a little bit, and the tackle guys. I pad it up. I like to pad it up for the cornerbacks, but if they're not going to get the passes defended, or if they're not going to get the interceptions on their part, then they're not going to register as high.
Yeah, so when we were talking about sort of the basic IDP positions, I mean, defensive line, linebackers, defensive backs, but when you want to break it down, I mean, you can go as far down as to defensive tackles, then defensive ends, or that edge position is sort of new in the past few years with sites starting to incorporate that. That really takes your 4-3, and it depends on what site you're going to, where they're pulling this information from, because different sites pull information. Even if you have the same positions from one site to another, how they label players will change vastly. So, not going to go into picking your site on this show, but just be aware of how the different sites do things, and maybe create a test league, play around with it, see what you like, what you don't like before you commit to something. But
real quick here.
Nope, go ahead.
All right. So just real quick here. Say you got into this situation, you're looking at what we have here, and you decide, okay, I want to play with it a little bit. Here's this is going to help you real quick. Kraig, if you was wanting to adjust like your linebackers or your defensive backs, if you want to adjust them up, which one are you going to adjust in your scoring there, up or down?
So if you want to improve your defensive backs, I mean, the big thing to really just do it, I guess, more consistently than interceptions, because people's minds go to that, like, well, defensive backs are more likely to get interceptions. True, but pass deflections are going to be an easier way to give them a higher boost than the other positions. Now, you're going to run into different seasons where you have a defensive lineman that gets 20 pass deflections because he's just batting balls. That's going to be sort of an outlier. But yeah, if you're looking really at that position, passes defensed. If you're trying to boost your traditional linebackers, I mean, solo tackles, assisted tackles, you could bump one or both of those up. So that's how I would do it off the top of my head.
Right. Now, it'll help your safeties too. That would help your safeties in some of the defensive backs. Safeties playing defensive backs, depending on what kind of designation. And just on the opposite, that's why I wanted to ask that question, get the ball rolling, because if you want to go and you want to turn around either up the IDL in the defensive ends or the edge rushers, you want to up them, then you're looking at the sacks and the tackles for loss, those types of QB hits if you have them. I know some leagues just have what is it? Pressure. I think ESPN has one pressure something. I don't know, putting pressures on them. But either way, same thing as QB hits, basically, in their terms. But either way, so yeah, just think about it a little bit. If you're going to go adjusting and you want to make those adjustments and you're trying to bring up one or two, you got to think about those other type of main stats that each position really depends on to boost themselves. So I wanted to just recite those real quick.
Yeah, and if you're creating a league, before you invite all your owners and make decisions as far as
Mm.
putting everything in stone, play with it. Like, have a standard something set up here, whichever one of these you want to use or your own, but have it listed so everyone can be aware of it. Take some screenshots of what off of last year, how different people would line up, and then go in and tweak some stuff, and then put them next to each
Right.
other and compare. Okay, what does this look like? What does that look like? Who did we
Right.
help? How do we need to balance it out? If that's your goal,
And to be specific, he's talking. You're talking about going in. You make your changes, then you go check projections or check end of the year results if you happen to be
Yep.
in a dynasty and you're fidging with that, right? That's
Yep.
okay.
Most sites
Because
will
there's
allow
some
you to do
people, yeah, folks. If you're, yeah, and I love it that we started this off with, this is actually, yeah. I mean, it's a beginner's guide. We're trying to help you out here, but at the same time, we know that there's also those guys out there that's been playing this, and they may not know about some of this deeper formatted stuff. If you're not out in a circle, so you might want to take up another tier worth of play and increase how well you get to enjoy your IDP.
and you can go even deeper than this. I don't have examples, and we're not going to try to convince people
Oh
to do
yeah.
that. But you can have this sort of scoring broken down by position. So you could have
Hmm.
cornerback scoring, defensive tackle scoring, linebacker, edge scoring. You could have it different for all of them
Hmm.
to try to tweak it to what Gary said about getting
Yep.
that balance if that's what you seek. Most
Yeah.
leagues don't go that deep, quite honest. Most of
Nope.
those are sort of
Nope.
degenerate leagues where you have those people in
Yeah. No.
really deep into their IDP careers
Right.
or in just dozens of leagues. They want something
And,
different, but it's
and
endless.
going that deep is fine. I mean, going that deep is fine. I don't know how you feel about it personally, Craig. Going deep, like, man, that is time consuming. If you got the time and you're the commissioner, and you can keep everybody happy, sure, that's a lot of work. But yeah, yeah, I couldn't do it. I've never set up one of my own leagues that way. I'm in one now, and I've played one before though.
Yeah, I don't. There's one league that I run, so I don't have any leagues like that.
Right,
But
right.
I do play in some leagues like that, and I think it's fine. Like, it makes you
Hmm.
think differently. It makes you think outside of the box. It is a
Oh
pain. Like,
yeah,
if
you
you
can't
have,
knock them.
10 different leagues with 10 different scorings, boy, you can,
Right,
twist your mind and
right,
pretzel trying to figure that stuff out.
right.
But yeah, I mean, if
What?
you're super detailed and want to get down to the nitty gritty and try to balance everything out by exact position, like Garrett said, you can do that. What we're talking
Mhm.
about here is these are different scoring setup for sort of across the board all IDP players,
Right,
which most
right.
leagues do it that way.
Right, because you're gonna probably, if you're just starting out, you're probably going to start with the balanced or below. I mean, it's really where you want to go. You want to go with that balanced or probably one of the tackle heavies, to get your feet wet a little bit. Probably is going to be able to, you're going to be able to relate more to advice from people like us that are out here or articles and general things that you're getting. A sack heavy used to be a really popular thing before balanced really took hold. It was just people trying to get the edge rushers up, defensive ends and such, or outside linebackers like Watt. And then you had your big play. But yeah, I mean, I would think most standard would start with like the tackle heavy or balanced, wouldn't you, Craig?
From what I've seen, yeah. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. Some
No,
of this stuff is
no, that's
just
true.
easier for people that are
Hmm.
beginning to wrap their mind around. If you want to dive in full force and have at it, feel free to. And you can
Yeah.
always find resources. Reach out to people for advice or ideas on how they've done leagues before. Um, but in
Oh
terms of
yeah.
just the
Good.
go
I
ahead.
apologize. No, I was just getting ready to say, oh yeah, the best way to do it is probably like me and you just dove in and figured it out. Hopefully, yeah. So you can find some good advice, but
Yep.
dive in either way.
For just looking at these categories here, before we sort of dive into what you can expect from having things set up like this, are there any of these categories that you generally don't see, or ones that we don't have on here that you like to see added for leagues?
Not really. I mean, in the gist of it, I mean, I like QB hits and pressures. Um, I like that to be added on. But I mean, for the most part, the rest of it is there. I usually don't worry about the block kicked. I kind of go with the. I don't even know if I set that, so might kind of an
Yeah.
outlier there. But yeah, other than that, it looks good to me. I'd use
And
any of them.
you have to realize too when you're setting these up, some of these things, the blocked kick, the safety, that sort of stuff, whatever you assign to that, if you make it huge, whenever that does happen, it has a big chance to sway a matchup or something. Whereas if it's smaller, it's not going to have as much of an effect just because of the rarity of those things. And
Mhm.
it's kind of where the idea behind the big play or the sack heavy stuff comes from, where, there's how many tackles a game in an NFL game?
Right.
There's
Right.
dozens of them. And you have a good linebacker, you're going to be getting quite a few, whether you label them just as tackle, whether it's a solo or an assist, or you break it down to solo and assist. Even tackles for a loss is something, probably within the past 10 years that has been more added along with those pressures and stuff, just to give more oomph to those
Mhm.
defensive line or edge positions. That way those players aren't just discarded. And to be honest, it's a lot of fun. I mean, when you're
Mhm.
playing along and you see someone get a sack or a tackle for a loss, and you're in one of these leagues, like, awesome, that's great for me, and
Mhm.
you're more engaged as opposed to, well,
Yeah.
it's another
You
tackle.
actually find yourself excited for your team's defense for more than one reason. If it's just
Yeah.
your team, you get excited about whatever game you're watching. Oh my God, I get that guy. That's got a sack. Or why didn't that idiot not get that sack? It's just another way to enjoy the game in NFL too. Just both sides of the ball. You start kind of catching on and watching your guys, and that's how people learn. It opens up another avenue for some people.
Now, there is one thing I want to bring up, and I don't actually know your thoughts on it, so it'll be a learning point for me. But a lot of
Uh
sites you have to watch out when you're creating your scoring system, because most sites do have stacking of stats.
Oh, yeah, I got nailed with that because I mean, there's a certain site that I don't play on very often, and I just kind of started going there this past year. Debating if I'm going to stay there. I don't know. Probably will. It's called for the Tipster League. So, hey, while I'm talking about, look for them in a couple of months because I want to have some free Tipster Leagues like I always do. And the winners may get a little prize. It's free to enter. And all it is I just put out this regular standard, what I considered a nice standard league. You can get your feet wet in IDP real quick with a balanced format and just take your chances. What do you got to lose? Maybe you might really enjoy yourself. A little bit more advanced, but check those out. And the question was, sir,
So about the stacking of scoring.
it nailed me. It nailed me. I turned around and I hit that first tackle and put in like I think it was put in 2 points or something.
I think
And I
so.
went
Yeah.
down and I seen solo tackle, and I'll be damned if I didn't put another 2 to 3 points in there. And that was the first time I ever used this. It actually was before. So now I don't even really commish in a certain site. I'm just not very good at it. I can do MFL really well, but not that one. But either way, so it wasn't until after the first game I'm like, what happened here? Because we got guys just like, they're getting 6 points a tackle, and it's just like you got whoever that cornerback was that first week that had like 10 tackles or some solos or whatever, he was just up there. I'm like, oh no. So of course this was a writers league, right? So all IDP guys got the giggle at me about messing that up, but they all understood. They all understood. So we went on and played the league. It was all
Well, and it
right.
was fun because you had defensive players outscoring many,
Yeah.
many offensive
Yeah.
players regularly, where it was an IDP heavy league, which I've never
Yeah.
played in before. but it's a nice cautionary tale that
Yes.
when you see something that says tackle, and then you have like solo tackle and assist,
Right.
if you have something in there for tackle, that's going to be added on top of whatever the points are for solo tackle or assist, and added on top of, if it's a tackle for a loss, those points will be added into it. So you could have a defensive end tackling a running back 1 yard behind the line of scrimmage, getting you tackle points, solo tackle points, and tackle for a loss points, which, depending on how you want to set that up, that could be a double-digit play, which if you don't want, be aware of that. And again, play around with your stuff ahead of time so you have a feel for how it's going to work.
And to make another point, everybody, if you ask one of these guys, if you ask Kraig, if you ask me, most of us are going to tell you, if you say, all right, hey, look, I just joined my first league. What do I need to do? And the first thing we're going to tell you is look at your scoring and settings. Yep. So you got to know the scorings. You got to know the scorings. You got to maybe look at your projections or whatever. You got to get an idea of which IDP is going to hold the value for you if you're going to have any success. If you never get a grip on that part of it, then you're going to have a really hard time ever enjoying the game or winning with it.
All right. So now we're going to sort of give you a feel. This is a new for me. I'm going to be jumping around to a number of screens here, but using these same scorings that we have set up, we've had it up here for a bit, so you can go back and screenshot it and then go back through the video or whatever, but it's going to give you for a feel just using these examples. We put them into test leagues just to give you an idea, looking at last year's end results, sort of where players' points would line up, who the top players are in each of the leagues. We can go through the different positions, but again, just to give you an idea of, in practice, what this looks like. So the first one, we're going to go to here. I think I have. So this, if you're looking at it, this is the sack heavy league, and we're centered on defensive linemen here. So this is stats. That's week 1. Sorry, I'm going to change it to the season. 2021 season points. You can see in a sack heavy league, you got TJ Watt, Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa. And of course, if you sort of look at the sacks that these guys are getting, they're the guys that are, at or near the top of the players that are getting sacks. Now, of course, there's other scoring that goes along with it. So, tackles do matter. But looking at your defensive linemen, and of course, on this site, TJ Watt has dual eligibility. You can see as a linebacker and a defensive lineman, same thing like Parsons. Not all sites are going to have that. So if your site doesn't, you can kick that out. But you can kind of see just.
Well, Kraig, they could see after I added it to the stream, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I had you. It was like you. It was like you're a few sentences in, and I'm like looking at mine. And I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. We're in there though.
I pulled it up and I didn't add it, but you can see here. So the names and this is total points. Sort of aligns with total sacks, and then Aaron Donald had 3 fewer.
So the gist of it.
Yeah.
So the gist of it, real quick, he's taken the sack heavy scoring that we had showed you, and he has applied it to this site, and this is the projections that they showed afterwards. So this would show you basically based off of that trusted site's projections or such, what they should be ranked, or end of the year. I apologize, end of the year, which is even better than any projections. Actually, if you think about it, you kind of have a better gauge on what most of these standard guys are going to do.
And then you can, jump around. We're not going to do a ton of this, but, going to your linebackers, of course, Watt and Parsons. And then you can see there's not a ton of linebackers that get sacks that also get a lot of tackles. I mean, you got Robert Quinn up a lot higher than you probably would in a tackle-heavy league, which we might look at, because you look at that tackle number, that's pretty low. You got 49 tackles, those 19 sacks boosted and upward. I mean, he even ended up being, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 7th, which is pretty darn high for a linebacker when you start to think about how Robert Quinn was used. And then guys, that get a couple more sacks in there, that's going to boost them up over guys that even had more tackles if it's just a few more. So
Right.
defensive
It
back
really.
won't be as
I mean, you're going to be a kind of in a pitch and toe there. I mean, you're going to have to decide, as I mentioned, the each scoring format, even the balanced is tough to get it to just 100% be balanced across the board. If you increase something, somebody else falls. If you know what I mean? I couldn't imagine without going to that granular type of scoring that you're talking about earlier that is really hard to find, is so time consuming to set up. So, in a lot of these instances, um, in normal balanced scoring format, we're not even going to see some of these names up here. You'll probably see an example of that shortly.
All right. So that is, again, that is our sack heavy example. Now I need to switch over. See how quickly I can do this, and if I can remember to. Nope, it's literally the exact same one I just had.
No. Oh, yeah. No, I can't even do elevator music right.
All right, we got tackle heavy. Here's one of our tackle heavy examples. So you're going to see big differences here. So again, final season stats for defensive linemen. You got Watt and Parsons, which, I mean, come on, folks. Those are going to be
outliers.
Guys, yeah.
They're outliers, folks.
Last year.
If you don't know it, you're going to know it soon enough. If you're just starting, they're outliers.
But you will see, sort of going down from there, the names that come up here. If you look at their their tackle totals, there's going to be, here's a guy, Christian Wilkins, right behind him in points with those tackles, even though he had 8 fewer sacks than Aaron Donald. 33 points difference over the course of 17 games. That's like 2 points a game. That's a huge difference. We didn't even see his name popping up there before. So again, you guys got other guys that are high into the tackles. Here's one, Leonard Williams, again, not as high in sacks, but he's probably a top 10 guy here because of the tackles that he gets.
Real quick, do us a favor. Yeah, show them that. Compare them to those. Scroll back up to the highest scoring guy here. So we had, take out Watt and Parsons. That's ridiculous.
Donald at 266.
266. Taking out the outliers of the DL here. What are they versus what's the highest scoring guys look like for linebackers? So big difference, folks, when you have tackle heavy.
100 some points, more than 100 points.
That was the point there, folks. Yep. Unfortunately, here on this particular site, we can't see an overall IDP, I guess.
We can. If we just did an IDP flex.
I forgot. All right.
We'll be able to bring it up. And then, you can see
gotcha.
Linebackers are still the same 3 there, and you're going to have to wonder how far we have to scroll down to find a different position here. Probably. So, of course, Watt, who we said, we know we're kicking him.
He slipped down.
Our first safety is probably, 20 guys deep or more?
Yeah.
And again,
at least
tackle total.
Mm-hmm.
And then, trying to find Parsons, farther down even. So Donald Hayward, now you're finally starting to get in there. You 266 versus 394, 366. It's a huge difference in positions, the scoring, and then how they end up ranking at the end of the year.
Yeah. You just it's a tool. Once you figure out, you might have an idea. Maybe you like linebackers. Maybe you've been hearing a lot about edge rushers, and maybe that's going to influence you on which one you start out with that we're offering or gave you to check out. You can just go from there, but just make sure that you understand what you're looking at, like he just showed you, because 99% of all these major sites are going to have some type of last year results or something that you can get a hold of within your site. You got to use that stuff, and that way that if you're in a tackle base, I'm not drafting Nick Bosa. I'm not drafting Aaron Donald. I'm not drafting anybody like that until I get a full complement of linebackers and defensive backs. So it matters. If you're in sack heavy, you're going to go get those top DLs. You're going to go get those top DEs, edge rushers, guys that are going to get the sacks for you. You know, those types of uh, box score stats. But that's part of this is what, just reminder as we go and we're going over these.
Here's another one. This is going to be another one of our tackle based, but it's again, you can kind of see if you go back again and scroll back through the video. So the first one that we had solo tackles, assisted tackles is the same. And then sort of, tackle for a loss, forced fumble, all that stuff was about the same. This one, it's different where a solo tackle is twice what an assisted tackle is. A solo is 3, an assisted tackle is 1.5. And now when you're looking at this, even just for the defensive lineman, who do you see shoot up here? Parsons is 1 over Watt. You got Hayward showing up there too. And again, what's it based on? Just valuing those tackles even more than the other one. So when you talk about tackle based, you're going to have different variations. These words don't have exact meanings in IDP compared to PPR. Well, you get a point per reception, or if it's half PPR, you get a half point per reception. That's why you see that clarification on the offensive side, but people generally know what you're talking about. Just as a plug, if you ever ask Gary questions on Sundays, I think he's going to be looking at having a live show potentially in season on Sunday again. As detailed as you can get. I'm saying potentially. I don't know what you're doing or not. I mean, they got a sit start on my channel, Roto Heat. You don't get IDP questions because you don't have IDP guys on there at all. It's all those offensive fools. But there's plenty of them out there. Or if you send Gary an IM or whatever you want, the more detail you can give him about your scoring, your positions, your setup, better answer he's going to be able to give you, as opposed to just, do I start Nick Bosa or Fred Warner? And he'll probably respond, can you give me more detail? So
first two things. First of all, actually, there are 3 things in a row that I asked somebody that's reached out to me that doesn't know, or even people that do know me. First thing I want to ask you, is it on MFL? Because if it's public, I'd like to see these leagues and settings on my own on MFL. The second thing is, if it's not on MFL, I'm going to ask you, what's your score setting? That is it. What's your score setting? And then I'm going to go right into what kind of starting lineup do you use? What positions do you use? Just list them what it's got to be. And I can go from there. I use, just like Kraig was mentioning, just start a league. You can go in ESPN, you can go to any of these, you can start your league. Doesn't mean you have to play that thing.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And you can do a lot of testing before you ever even get there to see what that sweet spot is for you. So, I vote balanced. Go balanced, folks, is here to stay. It's actually been around for a long time. It's actually been around in one form or another a long time. It's been tweaked on. So but it's just now become the standard.
And we will bring that up as the last.
No matter what the name it goes under.
I'm trying to figure out which one this is. That's the wrong one. When we're sharing a screen, folks, it does not give you a great preview as far as what these
while we're sitting here, I'm sitting here talking about these leagues. We're talking about these leagues, and we're talking about these balance, and we're talking about different forms of balance. You got to be flexible, because that's just it. Say you do have a league, you have, unless you're one of those people that commission every league and you set up every league you ever play in, you're going to come across, they're going to tell you it's a balanced format. You still better check that thing, because it might not be the same balanced format you have. It doesn't take too much of a tweak on something to change it, and it can matter. So just make sure you do check it out every time.
So as you kind of saw in the other ones here, we got our linebackers up here, which a lot of times those guys are going to be up here, but scoring wise, guys like TJ Watt are up there. Parsons is up there. You got Derwin James, Fitzpatrick. So you're starting to see safeties, cornerback come up more in here. Then you got your defensive linemen with Hayward. You have more guys. So
Don't worry, folks. We're going to give you a little gist here at the end, real quick, of just something real quick in your mind to have an idea of what we're talking about after we conclude the presentation.
So again, we're not going to beat it over the head. You can pull these up as far as, grab the scoring off the screen when you shoot back or create your own and go into whatever site that you want. I would suggest you play around with sites before you even choose a site, and then you figure out how you want to figure out your scoring. Because if you end up hating the site that you're on, you're not going to want to stay in the league, and your league probably won't last as long. I've seen that way too many times.
Right.
So people play on the site that you want, play with the people that you want, play with the scoring that you want. The fantasy football is completely customizable to you and what you want, and there's enough leagues out there that you can find or create one that you want. We're just sort of going into, again, here tonight as we sort of wrap this up here, the different options that you have when you're setting up an IDP league and how to figure out what you want for your own league.
Told you.
So we're starting to wind down here. We're reaching that hour point. Again, we had started a little bit late. So we're going a little bit over. Thank you for sticking with us here tonight. I'm sure I'm missing something, but Gary, any other considerations or things you wanted to cover here?
I mean, just real summary. I'm not going to go over all 6 of them, but I'm going to go real vanilla here. Okay, just real quick tip. So if you find out you're in a tackle heavy, so you want linebackers, defensive backs. There's the guys that's going to pad the tackle box. And you want those safeties, strong safeties, particularly because they're in the box with getting those combined tackles. If you're in a balanced, you're probably going to be trying to focus to begin with your top 5 to 10 DL. And then you're going to probably, with a couple of your sprinkle of your top linebackers, maybe. What do you think, Kraig?
Yeah, I mean, in balanced or big play leagues, you're really looking for sort of those outlier players that Gary mentioned. I mean, the guys like TJ Watt and Micah Parsons that literally just get used all over and can do pretty much everything. Those are your Swiss Army knives. But there aren't a whole lot of those. So then you're looking at positional scarcity. Right. You mentioned your defensive linemen. Those top scoring defensive linemen in your balanced or then moving to big play are going to be huge. It's going to be harder to find depth there than at linebacker.
Yep. And sack heavy is pretty self-explanatory. Your edge rushers, defensive ends, couple defensive tackles. You're going to want to get those in those sack heavies, and then you're going to have a second tier of those type of DLs or edge rushers that are going to come into play before linebackers probably.
And to Gary's point about safeties, strong safeties, those guys that can get you tackles, there's even a lot of value of those guys if you're looking at a big play league, because in Dynasty, you'll recognize it after you're in the league for 2 years. It is so hard to predict those interceptions for defensive backs. If you find a guy that consistently gets you 4 or 5 of them a year, you've struck gold, because by and large, it's just so hit or miss. Someone will fall in love with Trayvon Diggs. Oh, look at the year that he had last year. Do you think he's going to repeat that this year? Because I, as a Cowboys fan, don't, in terms of those interceptions anyway.
Right. Hopefully they just stop throwing his way, right? Somebody's going to be on the other side.
They kept throwing to him because he would give up those big plays too, which, again, most defensive leagues don't account for the poor play. If the quarterback throws an interception on offense, that's going to be a problem. If you're a defensive back and you get 12 interceptions, but you give up 20 touchdowns, those 20 touchdowns aren't counting against you, really. So,
we always suggest streaming. I do. Streaming cornerbacks. I do believe you might, other than the fact of what you just said. If you get a home run, just don't drop them.
Yeah, like if you find a Mike Hilton off of waivers, when you had started with the Steelers, where he's just getting you tons of tackles out of the slot and getting you some picks, by all means, hang on to him. But, how many of those guys are there a year that you'd be comfortable? There's Kenny Moore and Jalen Ramsey and Marlon Humphrey, maybe, that you'd be happy with at cornerback year in and year out lately. It's a very short list.
So short and sweet, I think that we just don't ever set up one other than big play that has any real focus on cornerbacks completely straight as the number one thing. That I think that would really screw up the scoring, wouldn't you? Could you
Yeah,
imagine just an all favor cornerback league? That would be interesting. I'm saying I don't do it, but I guess that would be that's the only way that I might not have ever tried that.
yeah. I mean, I'd have to look at it because even then, I think even if cornerback scoring is a premium, you could probably do all right streaming a cornerback
Mm,
because there's cornerbacks each week that pop off
right.
seemingly out of nowhere. But if you do your due diligence and you dig into it as far as points allowed per position for opposing team, and then this guy plays the slot, he's going against this receiver, against this many targets. I mean, how much effort you want to put into it, you
Right.
can probably
And
figure it
we
out.
just happen to do that for you folks at the gridironratings.com at the IDP tipsters page. Go check out my start sit charts sample for the end season. All you'll ever need in season. You didn't think I was going to have a progressive moment and not take a chance on that one, right? Right. Okay, we're
It
at the
was
end
in
of
there
this,
for
man.
you.
I'm
I'm
going to
glad you
shut
took
up.
it.
Yeah. Hey, and I'm good too, man. Hey, Craig, thank you.
So that's about it that we have here for you tonight. Thanks for tuning in, of course. And again, plug over at gridironratings.com. Make sure you're subscribed to get all that content. And you can see Gary's set start stuff in season. But of course, there's articles and rankings and all that good stuff in the off season. And make sure, since you're probably watching us on YouTube, but if you're not, go over there, subscribe, turn on notifications, like, comment. Comments are great. Keep interacting with us on there, and you can find Gary and myself. Our Twitter handles are down here at the IDP Tipster for Gary and at Roto Heat Craig for myself. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. We greatly appreciate it, and we hope you have a good night. Make sure you're tuned into the YouTube channel the rest of the week here because there will be Rider Dynasty tomorrow night. There's going to be a Thursday night Getting Defensive show, all sorts of good stuff coming with you as always. So for the both of us, have a good night.